Welcome back. All right, so we are 2 months to the day away from the start of the National Hockey League's 2025-2026 season. So it's a good time to have a discussion over which teams that missed the playoffs in 2025 might have a good chance of making the playoffs in 2026. So what I've got on the board here is the teams in order of how they finished. That missed the playoffs. I've got a couple of teams that made the playoffs we're going to discuss here, and yes, these are new magnets. Thanks for noticing. Mostly, anyways, I'm trying to get them in every team, but it's a little touch and go. Anytime that I'm trying to get all the stickers and all the to turn into magnets, I almost never get all 32 teams. So, anyways, so looking at which team missed the playoffs by the least in the East, and we'll start with the East here. Columbus finished 2 points back of a playoff spot with 89. The last time Columbus made the playoffs was 2020. Now, if you look by the odds, and in terms of odds of winning the Stanley Cup, if you look there, plus 10,000 for the Columbus Blue Jackets, which is worse in terms of odds than the Vancouver Canucks. So the odds makers don't see Columbus as being a team that's going to jump into a playoff spot. I personally think Columbus has a good chance, and so I understand why people aren't necessarily betting on them to make the Stanley Cup and win it, but, I mean, their history is not great when it comes to the playoffs when they do get there, but I still think they could surprise some people. Detroit, 86 points this past season. The last time they made the playoffs was 2016. They also have odds of plus 10,000, and understandable in their case as well. Detroit got really close to making the playoffs in 2024, fell further off the pace in 2025, 5 points back of Montreal, after finishing, I believe, tied in points for 2024, just the tiebreaker took them out, and so the Detroit Red Wings now are a team that have a lot to prove. There's some pressure, I think, on the GM to get things going, so we'll see how things turn out for them this season. Todd McClellan gets to run things for his first full season behind the Detroit bench, which should be good for him. I think between Detroit and Columbus, I do like Columbus a little better than Detroit, but honestly, I think they're both going to be pretty close to that spot. Now, the odds makers think the Rangers get back in the playoffs. They were a team that finished first in the Metro in 2024 and first overall as well. They had 85 points, so 6 points back of a playoff spot. Their playoff odds plus 3,000, which is the best of, I believe, anybody on the board. So the odds makers believe that the New York Rangers get back to the playoffs. Not necessarily that they win the Stanley Cup. They're not a favorite there. But the expectation is the Rangers will get better. That's the Rangers garb. They should. You've got Shesterkin. You've got a pretty good offensive club. You've got a decent defensive unit as well. As long as they can avoid some of the drama from this past season, yeah, they should be a playoff team. So I would say of the three teams we've discussed so far, the Rangers have the best chance of getting back into the playoffs. Then you have the Islanders. The Islanders also have plus 10,000. So along with Detroit and Columbus there, they had 82 points this past season, but it's a year after they finished third in the Metro in 2024. So the Islanders and the Rangers both made the playoffs in 2024. Both of them missed the playoffs this past year, so we'll see how things go. I don't think the Islanders jump back into the playoffs. I think if I was going to have my own odds on this, I would say the Rangers have the best chance. I'd probably have the Islanders as not having the best chance. And yeah, I can go ahead and rank this. I think me ranking this makes some sense too. But I'll go through everybody first. I don't think the Islanders jump back into a playoff spot. I think there's more work to be done for the New York Islanders. But at least with Matthew Darch as GM, I think there's reason for optimism with the New York Islanders and their fans. Pittsburgh, 80 points this past season. They haven't made the playoffs since 2022, so we're up to 3 straight seasons and no playoffs for Pittsburgh. Or as broadcasters would put it, it's a shame Sidney Crosby's not in the playoffs. Plus 20,000 in terms of the odds for Pittsburgh. So they're not being favored to get better or get back into a playoff spot. And I would agree. I don't think Pittsburgh's back in a playoff spot. I think that Kyle Dubas has his eye firmly on next year's draft lottery and draft class and understands that the Penguins' core players are older and therefore you need to have a bit of a youth movement for Pittsburgh, at least for now. Buffalo, 79 points for them. They haven't made the playoffs since 2011. So middle school kids have never seen Buffalo in the playoffs. That's a lot. And their odds are plus 20,000. I would love to see Buffalo back in the playoffs. I would be quite excited to see Buffalo in the playoffs, having a chance to wear their wonderful black jerseys and playoff games. I don't know that that's going to happen. And I say this because I have talked about Buffalo now on this channel for 9 years, and they've never been a playoff team in the whole time that it's my fault. No, see, Detroit can say it's my fault. It's not my fault. Detroit hasn't made the playoffs since the channel became a hockey channel. But yeah, Buffalo, it's been a while, and I don't think they jump back into the playoffs. Boston had 76 points this past season, but they were 1 year removed from finishing second in the Atlantic. The moves made by Boston this summer would seem to indicate that they think they can get back into the playoffs. Their odds of winning the Stanley Cup plus 10,000. So if you put down $100, if they win, you get $10,000. But in reality, if you put down $100 on Boston winning the Cup in 2026, you've lost $100. So the 76-point Bruins, we'll see if they're any better this year. The expectation is if you get Hampus Lindholm, as well as McAvoy back in the lineup for a full 82-game schedule, that'll help a lot. And it will, but it probably puts Boston right about here. I don't think Boston's going to be a playoff team this year, but we shall see. I think they're betting on a bounce back from Swayman, too. And then Philadelphia also had 76 points. They have not made the playoffs since 2020. Interestingly enough, Philadelphia plus 7,500. I think that's the Rick Tocchet boost. I think because of Tocchet being the coach, I think the expectation is that Philadelphia will improve. Not playoff improvement. Definitely not at that level. But move ahead of some of the teams that you see on the board here. In that Philadelphia has better odds than Buffalo, or Boston, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, Detroit, and Columbus. So they would be amongst teams that missed the playoffs. Second highest behind Montreal. Montreal's the team that seems to have longer odds than teams that missed the playoffs, in that the Rangers have a plus 3,000, the Rangers a plus 6,000, or Montreal's a plus 6,000. So that's double. And I get it. I think the expectation is that Montreal was ahead of the curve, and that they're probably going to have a bit of a drop back this coming season. They did finish with 91 points. They were the number 2 wild card. That is only 2 more points than Columbus, only 5 more points than Detroit, and only 6 more points than the Rangers over an 82-game schedule. So they're close. I don't think Montreal drops out. But if we're going to go ahead and handicap the teams that missed the playoffs, and if I'm going to go ahead and say who I think is most likely, I will agree. I think the Rangers are the most likely to jump back in, so I'll put a 1 there. I would say Columbus, I'd put them as the second most likely. Detroit's probably the third most likely to jump into a playoff spot of the remaining teams. Do I like Philadelphia more than the Islanders? No, I would give the Islanders, I put them as the fourth most likely. And then I'll go with Philly. No, I'll go with Boston. I'll go with Boston and then the Philadelphia Flyers. So 5, 6, and then Pittsburgh to me 7th and Buffalo 8th. So if I had to handicap this about who I think is most likely, that's where I think it goes. So that's the East. Let's go ahead and move over and we'll discuss the West. The Calgary Flames missed the playoffs on a tiebreaker. 96 points. They haven't made the playoffs since 2022. But the odds makers aren't a big fan of Calgary. Plus 15,000 for Calgary, even though they haven't really lost anything in the offseason. I mean, Vladar's out, but Dustin Wolf looks like he's going to be a very good goaltender. And so I'm kind of surprised that the odds are longer than for the Islanders, Detroit, Columbus, Boston, considering how well they played. I mean, their odds are double the odds for Philly. So if you put down $100 on Calgary, you'll still lose $100. But maybe there's more tension to you losing your $100. The Calgary Flames, I don't know if they end up above the playoff line, but we already took them for granted last year, and clearly the odds makers are taking them for granted a little bit this year. Vancouver's given a decent chance. Plus 6,000 is the odds there. They had 90 points, so they missed the playoffs by 6. But remember, they won the Pacific Division in 2024. And according to polling of Canuck fans, A lot of Canuck fans think they're going to get back into the playoffs. I don't really share that optimism. I want to. I really, really want to. I want to stand here right now and say, oh, they're going to get back in. I don't share that optimism. Should they be better? Yes, but until we see it, right? So Vancouver, with 90 points, missed the playoffs by 6, but here's Utah. Utah is clearly the team that a lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon for, and I'm pretty much in that boat as well. They last made the playoffs as the Coyotes in 2020, and I know that officially that history isn't carried over, but the roster goes to Utah, so to me that is notable, that a lot of the players on this roster haven't seen playoff hockey for 5 years, but the plus 4,000 tells you that of all the teams on the board, the only one with better Stanley Cup odds are the New York Rangers. So Utah is the team that seems to be getting picked as the most likely to make the playoffs in the West. 89 points this past season just puts them 7 points out, and definitely there were games late in the season where they could have, maybe they should have won, and so if they win those this coming season, maybe they're the team that makes it. The Anaheim Ducks are a sexy pick for some to make the playoffs. They have plus 10,000 as their odds, so the odds makers not enamored with them as some others. They last made the playoffs in 2018. The Ducks, it feels like they're due. But they have a lot of young players in net, on the blue line, up front. It takes time for young players to really come around. And trying to predict when that jump is going to occur, it can be tough. So I do think the Ducks are going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. I do think they'll be more in that 90-point range. I don't know if they're going to be a playoff team. Seattle, 76 points this past season. They haven't made the playoffs since 2023, and the odds are not in their favor, plus 30,000. I'm surprised that Seattle's odds are that long, but I kind of get it. They don't really have that superstar forward. They have mostly a no-name defense. Joey Decord is a good goaltender, but there would be some doubt with Joey Decord that I think is understandable. And so, yeah, plus 30,000. Surprised by that because Nashville's a plus 10,000. So if you're a Flames fan and you want to be mad, 68 points Nashville, 96 points Calgary, and according to the odds, Nashville has a better chance of winning the Stanley Cup than Calgary. So there you are. 68 points, though, for Nashville. They were a number one wild card in 2024. The team we watched this past year, not that team, not even close, not at all. The Nashville Predators, I don't see them being back in the hunt this year, but the plus 10,000 means that they have the same odds as like Boston, Islanders, Detroit, Columbus, and Anaheim. So there you go. The Chicago Blackhawks, 61 points this past year, plus 50,000. So if you want to lose $100, there you go. But yeah, they haven't made the playoffs since 2020 with the Blackhawks. And they're due for some kind of a bump. But remember, if they improve by 15 points, which is a lot, they go to 76, which is still not a playoff team. So for Chicago to make the playoffs, well, they missed by 35 points. So you have to think a minimum of a 30-point improvement would be needed. And that's a lot. That's a lot to ask from this team that really isn't noticeably better so far than the roster that finished out the 2024-2025 season. And San Jose finished with 52 points. They haven't made the playoffs since 2019, the Sharks, and plus 50,000. So not given great odds to make it back to the playoffs either. In fact, Chicago and San Jose are easily the teams with the longest odds to get back to the playoffs. The Seattle Kraken being next on that list, and then Pittsburgh and Buffalo. So for San Jose, it is still a rebuild for them. It is still unlikely they make the playoffs, but they should be better. Another example here of if they had a 15-point improvement, that'd take them to 67. So can they improve by 15 points? Absolutely. Does that bring them closer to the playoffs? Not really. So the San Jose Sharks are still in this rebuild and very likely to have a top draft pick again next year. St. Louis is the team that has longer odds than Utah. So according to the odds makers, Utah jumps into a playoff spot, thus the asterisk for the Rangers in Utah. I didn't use the Utah Mammoth logo for this one. Many apologies, but I can still use Utah Hockey Club. They're still in Utah and they're still a hockey club. But St. Louis, I'm surprised, mildly surprised. St. Louis is the team that's got the longer odds at plus 5,000. St. Louis, a 96-point team and a number 2 wild card. So for Blues fans that have been talking to me for a while about how I don't give the Blues credit or however you want to look at that, get them. Get them. There you go, the odds makers. St. Louis, I do think is going to stay in the playoffs. I'd be kind of surprised if they don't. I do understand, though, that both teams that the odds makers have as not above the playoff line, if you count the top 16 and the bottom 16 as playoffs, non-playoffs, both of these are the number 2 wild cards. So it is the easiest thing to do to say, well, Montreal doesn't make it in the East and St. Louis doesn't make it in the West. So doing the odds the same as before, who do I think is most likely to jump above the playoff line in the West? I'm going to give Calgary the best chance, even though others don't seem to think so. I'm going to go with the Canucks number 2. No, I can't do it. I cannot have the Canucks number 2. I look at it and I go, no, Utah. Utah is number 2 in my eyes. And it wouldn't be the first time that somebody's thought I have number 2 in my eyes. The Vancouver Canucks I'll give number 3, barely ahead of the Ducks, who I'll have with 4th. I honestly think Seattle 5th. I think Nashville's in for a long year. I'd make them 6th. Between Chicago and San Jose, I'm going to go with Chicago 7th and San Jose is 8th, but I think it's just as likely as monkeys flying as Chicago or San Jose making the playoffs in 2026. But maybe there are flying monkeys, aren't there? Maybe we get there. Maybe this is the year. Maybe San Jose or Chicago can conjure some flying monkeys and make it to the playoffs. Sure, why not? So I do think that it is always interesting. There is recency bias. I know when I did my power rankings last week that there was a lot of discussion about, this is recency bias. Yes, there's always recency bias when you look at sports. We haven't seen a game played since the regular season ended for a lot of these teams. So the idea that you just assume they're going to be better, you assume they're going to be worse, it is all highly subjective. And there will always be recency bias. We will always look at last season and go, well, since that team was good enough last year, they should be good enough this year. That's not always how it works. So let me know your thoughts. Which teams do you think jump into the playoffs? So, for instance, 3 teams missed the playoffs this past year that made it the year before in the East. And there were 2 that missed the playoffs in the West who made it the year before. So if 3 teams are going to drop out in the West, in the East, let me know your thoughts on who you think that might be. And if there's 2 in the West, I may do a video on that at some point soon as well. But I wanted to talk about which teams might jump above the playoff line. This was a request I had from somebody actually at a meetup. So there you go. But thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. Hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.